And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody, to everybody's favorite internet podcast that is hosted by two people who are both doctors,
But not doctors.
indeed. So it's been a hell of a week. Once again, it's, people say to me, Patrick, how do you keep coming up with things to talk about?
Yeah, Patrick, how do you keep on coming up with things to talk about?
Well, there we go. It just happened again. Well, and I tell everyone, Chris, this, that the thing is, we just got really lucky living in the end times. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay, that was not the answer that I thought you were going to give.
Oh, you thought I was going to give a really funny answer that is both witty and appropriate to the times?
Witty and appropriate to the times is what I thought you were going to do.
Yeah, I'm fresh out of that. Sorry, everyone.
However, here we are in yet another wonderful week of chaos, courtesy of the White House. So yeah, let's without any further ado,
let's get into it.
Yeah, right? The news.
Yeah,
the things that happened this week.
So where do we want to begin? Do we want to begin with something light and comic, or do we want to start with something a little bit more Death of the Westie? I don't know. What do we think?
Let's start heavy and end light.
All right. What do you got for me?
Oh, okay. What do I have? All right, let's start with, well, this is something that we haven't talked about yet, but this is not light and nice, but it is interesting. Heathrow was shut down today. London Heathrow Airport was shut down because of a fire.
That is true. At a substation.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's interesting that a fire at a substation could take down the busiest airport in Europe.
Yeah, well, obviously, the airports require a ton of power. I believe they have their own power grids. Because obviously you don't want the power going out in the middle of a plane landing or something, and so the power grid went down at Heathrow, or the power station, one of the substations went down at Heathrow overnight, and they had to shut down the entire airport. And one of the things I found interesting was all of London effectively lives underneath one of the 7 paths for airplanes, because we have 7 airports in the area.
That's true.
I'm pretty sure I live underneath one for London Heathrow. And I just didn't see any planes today. I was out a couple times and I looked up, because you always see planes. There's always planes in the window.
Right.
Well, not coming into the house, but there are planes. You can see them coming in, flying in. And I've been on some of those planes when they were coming down, or descending to land. Yeah. And they fly over and there was just nothing in the air today, which is wild. It reminded me of, I hate to say it, COVID.
Yes. Oh God, there's just reminders everywhere. Between the lack of planes in the sky, and the talk about a plague that's currently destroying American chickens.
Yeah. Let it run rampant, he said.
Yep. Let her rip.
Let her rip.
Yep. It's for some reason that seems to be the right wing's favorite response to anything of a viral nature. Like, I'd like to think of the Middle Ages back in the 1300s, and there were probably conservatives back then saying, the Black Death, I think we should just see what happens.
Well, they did, though. I mean, they had no other choice. Where here you have, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., famously not a doctor.
Yeah, famously.
Either. I mean, he is a lawyer, so I guess he's got a JD.
So he thinks he knows everything.
So, yeah, but the JD doesn't give you qualifications to understand, how pathology works, and he has no background in that, as far as I can tell, and he decided that the best answer for to deal with the bird flu epidemic in America, and this is very interesting, only America, is to let the bird flu run riot through all the birds, and the birds that survive will be super birds.
Exactly.
Who will be able to...
Who will never die, Chris.
Who will never die. So, lots of farmers, or from what I've seen in my brief looking up on this, has said that's totally bonkers.
Well, and it's bonkers for a few reasons, from what I understand. But what's your favorite bonkers reason, Chris?
Oh, I never got past it's bonkers, because it is bonkers. Oh. Because, I mean, you're just letting this virus run through and kill millions of chickens in the hopes that one survives.
It does have a 90% death rate.
90% death rate. So
I should point out is 3 times the death rate of the bubonic plague. So it's pretty bad.
Oh, it's right. So I'm thinking of some reasons why this is a bad idea now.
Right. Go on. This is a rich vein to tap.
Yeah. So if you let it run rampant through all these chicken communities, which is a weird way to put it, but yeah, and you let humans interact with those chickens, the virus has a greater chance of mutating into something that can kill humans, with, I suppose, the exact same or similar death rate.
Which would be, I think that'd be bad. I'm gonna say that'd be bad.
You're gonna say that'd be a rut-row?
Yeah,
for
humanity?
A little
bit of a tiny little whoopsie, really.
Well, yeah, of course, and obviously, I don't want another pandemic or an epidemic in America, but I mean, I would love to see how the MAGA folk react to an epidemic on RFK's watch. Anti-vaxxing RFK, who said, you know what we need to do with bird flu? Give it to more birds.
Well, the thing is, Chris, I mean, why stop at birds? If you really want to make America healthy again, then I think what you really need to do is to clearly let the plague run rampant through people as well. Sure, you're saying to yourself 90% of everyone dying, that could be bad for the economy. But I'll tell you what, Chris, the people who are left, the people who survive it, again, they will never die. So that's the
deal. That's the deal that you make with the virus, is that if I survive you, you will never ever be able to stop me.
You get total immunity to bullets
for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So moving on, let's hope that I guess we'll see what happens. Oh, P.S. Just as a side note, why this is only happening in America and not in Mexico or Canada is, as far as we know, in Canada, they don't pack in birds nearly as closely together, and they're not allowed to grow as many chickens in the same place at the same time, whereas America, since the 90s, have basically been able to have huge factory farms.
Millions of chickens in very, very close quarters with, I'm going to say, probably not the best waste treatment systems, Chris?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. So it's sort of like exactly the perfect breeding ground for disease.
Yeah.
If you were looking to build a breeding ground for disease, Chris.
Yeah, but at the same time, you get more chickens and eggs.
That's true.
So, and that's why food prices are finally starting to stay as high as they are.
Exactly. Solving the problem of cheap eggs, one dead chicken at a time.
Yes. So, moving on from that to other interesting things that have been happening this week. Let's start. Let's head over to Europe again. Let's talk about Ukraine. Spent a lot of time on Ukraine last week because obviously, as we said before, it's the finger in the dam for global peace or global war.
Yeah, basically holding back I would say resurgent Russia, except that I don't think that's really the right phrase for Putin's regime. It's not that Russia is resurging, it's more that it's just sort of like, it's like his regime is a little bit like a pimple that's come to a head, It just has to burst out. Really? I just don't understand how a country with an economy smaller than that of Italy has been able to throw its weight around and then believe that it was going to be able to, have a cakewalk into Ukraine and seize control of what is, a pretty big country. It's a pretty big country.
Big country. I mean, the nuclear weapons do help.
They do, because it makes everyone else think, oh God, if we annoy Putin, he will nuke us all. Which is weird, because presumably Putin doesn't want to get nuked, and, the French do have nukes.
Well, and several other countries.
Yeah.
So there was a ceasefire talk over the weekend between Trump and Putin, and then American officials and Zelensky, and eventually Trump and Zelensky spoke. Trump and Putin spoke for almost 2 hours. I believe we covered most of this last week. But the outcome of all of the talk seems to have landed on the idea that for 30 days, Russia and Ukraine will not fire upon each other's energy infrastructure.
Yes, a huge, huge breakthrough for peace, where both sides agree that they will not blow up each other's power stations.
Until just after that call where Russia attacked.
Oh, what was it that they attacked, Chris?
Was it which nuclear power station did they attack?
Oh, it's a nuclear power station that they attacked. Oh, that's fantastic. Is that the one in Zaporizhia?
The one that everybody, the largest nuclear power station, in Europe?
Yeah, just a really big nuclear power station. It's fine, Chris, because you see, having already shot a missile into fricking Chernobyl, they were running out of targets that were nuclear power plants.
We should clarify as well that Russia did shoot a drone, or at least one of Russian drones.
A drone
hit the shell of reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, which is very famous for having melted down.
Yeah.
And almost killing us all.
Yeah. Very, very close to a really horrible death for millions of people. Yeah, that's what happened there.
And it's also a huge just picture of Soviet incompetence and inefficiency. Which we should probably talk about maybe when we talk about authoritarianism. I think
that is definitely that's one of the big. It really is one of the big stories of how authoritarian governments work. And you would do yourselves, I'm going to say, a favor by watching the TV show Chernobyl that came out not too long ago.
Yeah, I bought that.
Yeah, with Jared Harris and I believe Samantha Morton. I think she's in
her and Skarsgård.
Yes, that's right, Stellan Skarsgård. Yeah, really excellent cast. Very, very good. The stuff of nightmares. So some light viewing before bedtime. Really.
Some light viewing before bedtime, or if you're in a really bad mood.
Bring the kids.
And in addition to the ceasefire talks, there is also some chat about Ukraine, or about the United States running Ukraine's nuclear power plant.
Just hand them over.
Yeah,
just hand them over, said Marco Rubio.
Yeah,
and we'll run them, and that way, Putin wouldn't possibly attack because, reasons.
Because America's been so hard on him so far that he wouldn't want to piss off the country that's literally given him everything that he wants.
Well, that's true. I mean, why would you bite the hand that feeds you cake from the mouths of the starving? Why would you do that, Chris?
Yeah, the idea that America would go into Ukraine and then run their power plants is insane. But obviously par for the course for this administration. And Vladimir Zelensky obviously said, absolutely not. That doesn't make any sense. We're not going to do that.
Yep.
At least that's what he's saying now. But obviously, all of this is just, Russia playing for time and America either not understanding that they're playing for time or not caring that they're playing for time and just waiting out the entire game to see, how long it takes for, Ukraine to collapse.
It does kind of feel like that's the game plan here because, and I've been thinking about this, right? I had been operating under the assumption that Putin's grand design here was to get Donald Trump elected. Donald Trump would then be in his corner, be his ally, and get him, a favorable outcome to the war, right?
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to think that's actually not quite what the deal is. Because if you look at the fact that he agrees to this ceasefire on the infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and then immediately violates exactly that agreement that he just agreed to with Donald Trump, this makes Donald Trump look
incredibly weak and foolish.
Fantastically weak and foolish. Like this is the kind of thing that Netanyahu was doing with regard to Biden during the Gaza genocide. Where agreements are sort of made and then immediately broken, where the United States is shown to be a paper tiger in terms of what it's willing to do. And it was clear why Netanyahu would do that with Biden. For Netanyahu, job number one is getting Trump reelected, because then he has a free hand in Gaza.
Which we'll talk about in a second.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But why would Putin do this with Trump? And I think the only reason that I can sort of come to, as slightly conspiratorial as it may be, I know, right? Tinfoil hat time, everybody, get them on.
Hang on.
Oh,
I've not put it on. It's okay. You can say what you want.
All right,
put
fantastic.
on my tinfoil hat.
So here's my suspicion. Putin's grand design here isn't so much to have a win in Ukraine, although that is something he very much wants and is working towards. I think the real goal here is just to utterly shatter American leadership in the world. And weakening Trump immediately after getting Trump elected is, I think, a way for him to do that. Because Donald Trump is already alienating all of America's allies. He's already shattering America's place in the global economy. And all of this, while claiming to be making America great again, apparently moving towards economic autarky, and also making America somehow respected. And yet, of course, what we're seeing is, well, America not being respected at all. Donald Trump being made a fool. I have to think that this is a deliberate strategic decision by Putin.
That's an interesting take on it, because I was wondering Obviously when Trump won the election, the first thing I did think about after my friends and family was what's going to happen in Ukraine, because obviously you and I are much closer to the war than people in America.
Yeah.
And again, I remember I went back to those early days of the beginning of the Ukraine war, where I was just thinking, wow, how fast and far is this thing going to go? And I was pleasantly surprised when it didn't go that far, didn't go that fast, and Russia was seen to be, at least on their conventional weapons, a paper tiger.
Yeah.
But when Trump came in, I'm like, okay, here we go. This is it. And
yep.
And Trump is obviously clearly on Putin's side on this.
Yep.
But you would assume that there was a transaction here, that Putin and Trump were going to be on the same page to immediately attack afterwards. Now, after you said that I'm not going to do that, not only completely undermines any further negotiating positions you'll have, because if you say, oh yeah, we've spoken to Putin, we've spoken to his people, we have the guarantees, the verbal guarantees that he's not going to do it, therefore you can trust us when we say you're good to move on to the next step.
Yep.
And then you get embarrassed like this. Like what's the benefit for Putin embarrassing Trump, and also just I hadn't thought about the destabilizing America point, because obviously Trump's actions and the MAGA folks' actions over the past 6 weeks since the election have been to destabilize our relationship with our allies, destabilize our domestic systems, try to turn us into an oligarchy, forcefully turn us into an oligarchy, which America hasn't been an overt oligarchy ever. We've had very rich people who've been in charge of portions of the country, but the idea of democracy is deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in the United States. So to embarrass Trump in this way, I don't know if it weakens him with his core minority in his base, but I mean, the more and more you think that Trump is a strong man, and then this keeps on happening to him, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the point of him if he can't stand up to these dictators who are supposed to all love him and do what he says, and they're all supposed to be on the same page?
Well, that's the thing. It puts the lie to a big part of his claim that he made during the election, that Russia, the only reason Russia invaded Ukraine was that Donald Trump was not president.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump, you see, is so fearsome that Putin would not dare
that's right
to do anything that would make him look foolish. And now that's literally what's happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The only reason why I am willing to say that I think this is at all likely is that I also think that Putin is not great as a strategic thinker. And
careful.
I know it's a big claim. It's a big claim. I'll back it up by saying he decided to invade Ukraine with nowhere near sufficient forces, believing that he'd be greeted as a liberator and it'd be over in 3 days. Not even Christmas. Chris.
Yeah.
3 days.
From what I understand, these guys who invaded, the actual soldiers who invaded, came with their dress uniforms.
They sure did. And he also sent his airborne troops, the VDV, the cream of the crop of the Russian military, parachuting into Kyiv to seize control of the airport, where they were then shot to death by the Ukrainians who had guns and were not afraid to use them. So this has not been a very smart move on his part. There are those who argue that one of the reasons he was willing to do this was that he, like many a dictator before him, is only getting the information that he wants to hear from the people below him.
What did you call it before? Serving the leader...
Sorry, working towards the Führer.
Working towards the Führer,
is the phrase to describe how the Nazi regime worked. And I think it's something that you could see in a lot of authoritarian regimes as well.
Well, they have to.
Yeah.
Well, who are you going to appeal to? The courts?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? So it may very well be that Putin believes that America is in such a parlous state that making Donald Trump look incredibly weak will cause some kind of major strategic destruction for the United States beyond what Trump is already doing. And I don't know if that's really true. I think that Donald Trump doesn't need the help, quite frankly. But it's interesting that Trump seems to be making the same sorts of mistakes. Because if you're Donald Trump, why would you be throwing over your allies? Why would you be attempting to make everyone else afraid of you and slapping tariffs on everyone, and then being surprised when they respond. And
yeah.
It's
clearly. I mean, that's probably more about the people who are around him, who again working towards. I'll say the leader here.
Go on then.
For
Well, we'll use
fairness,
the English translation.
We'll use the English translation, working towards the leader, where if people are just telling him, "Oh, you're so smart, you're so wise, you're so brave," and I mean, I saw clips of interviews he's had so far with like Fox News or whatever, because he only talks to friendly journalists, and they're effectively, "Oh wow, just being in your presence is so amazing, and you've done so much, and you're so great.
Yeah.
Oh, can I wash your feet, sir?" So if you're surrounded by people like that, you gotta think that you basically can do no wrong.
Do you think it's possible that he is getting high on his own supply?
Getting high off his own supply, potentially, but I hear that he doesn't drink, and I assume I will take that for the truth because he never lies. Lies, especially the people that he marries. So next up, let's talk about, because we have a couple more things.
That's true. It's been quite the week.
It's been
once again
a huge week.
Yep.
Gaza is back in the news. Well, is back in the news for the same reasons it was last year.
Yeah,
which is not good.
Yeah. So what exactly has happened here? My understanding is that the ceasefire that had been negotiated and agreed to between Israel and Hamas has broken down again, although I'm not entirely certain why it has, like what the sticking point is.
Well, the Israeli government is saying that they haven't returned enough hostages, and I'm not entirely sure what the Hamas line is, but...
presumably that they have, I would suspect.
Well, perhaps they have, but frankly, I don't think it matters at this point, because the government decided that it makes more sense to just go back to the pattern of bombing as many people as they can.
Yeah,
they've killed hundreds of people over the past 2 days, according to sources from within Gaza, which the news would say is the Hamas, funded or backed health agencies, but nobody disputes the death tolls from those people, and never has.
Well, that's the thing. It's important to recognize that after the Palestinian Civil War, Hamas became the government of Gaza. So, as a political party, as a terrorist group, they're bad. They are not good, in my opinion. And I know that's definitely a controversial take, I would say. But I stand by it. But at the same time, they're also the government of Gaza. So it's not like Hamas has its own party-owned and operated health institutions. It's that Gaza has hospitals, and the government of Gaza runs those hospitals, and that government happens to be run by Hamas. So it's a little bit like saying, that like, democratic hospitals are claiming that people are dying from COVID, when no, it's just hospitals are claiming.
Oh yeah, hospitals in New York.
Exactly.
The liberal New York hospitals
are
saying that
with their liberal medicine, Chris.
Yeah, with their liberal medicine. Mm-hmm. But what's basically, it's been the war, and it's hard for me to use the phrase war at this point.
It's
been restarted, and if you take this in combination with what Trump said at the beginning of his presidency, of basically, how do I say this? Getting rid of all of the Palestinians and forcing them out of Gaza.
Oh, I know how to say that, Chris. Ethnic cleansing.
And ethnic cleansing. That's the word I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to remove all the, because no way you look at it, the idea that you can't stay here anymore, even though you're from here.
Yep.
It's just ethnic cleansing. America did that to the Native Americans.
Yeah. I thought we agreed that was bad. I think I remember learning in school that was not considered to be the done thing.
It's not. It's not great. And obviously, there are people who believe that this is a defensive operation as opposed to an offensive operation. But with the level of destruction has far past defense.
It's gone. Well, that's the thing. It's gone so far beyond degrading Hamas, because it's gone towards, we're going to find where a commander of Hamas lives, and then we're going to blow up the apartment complex that he and 50 other families live in, while all the women and children are there. We're going to blow it up.
Yeah.
And that I struggle to see how that is a proportional response in keeping with, the nation of Israel's responsibilities under a host of international treaties to which it is a party. What is the name? What's the name of the international agreement named after a city in the Netherlands? The Hague,
The
right?
Hague Convention?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing,
Yeah.
Rules of war, fun things like that.
So, so obviously that's going to be ongoing and we'll keep an eye on it. One of the things, or the last thing I'll say on this, is that I was listening to an interview between the ambassador to the UK from Israel and Andrew Marr, and the conversations that they're having, it's very much two different worlds, where you have the visible destruction and then the explanation for the destruction as defense, and then when the question of removal of all the Palestinians are presented to the ambassador, the answer is just waffle, and it isn't the Palestinians can stay if they want to stay. It's always, well, I don't want to see anybody else get hurt, and also, and this is what I kept on noting, President Trump backs our plan 100%. So the introduction of President Trump into that setting has definitely made things completely worse.
I mean,
this
is the thing, because under Biden, it was not good, because you had the United States supplying weapons to Israel to engage in what is, quite frankly, violence that is vastly disproportionate to the need to defend itself. And I don't think anybody would take issue with the idea of a state or a people having the right to defend themselves.
Yeah.
But just because I'm defending myself when someone's threatened me, doesn't mean that I can do anything that I want.
You can't push him into a wood chipper for stepping on your toes.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's not equate stepping on your toes to what happened on October 7th.
Exactly.
But
it's even if someone is coming literally to kill me and has already killed a member of my family, that does not give me the right to then murder their family in response. It doesn't give me the right,
and the rest of the neighborhood.
Right, exactly. Like there are clear points when such a response becomes utterly disproportionate and itself a crime. And I struggle to see how anyone could argue at this point that Netanyahu's government in Israel has not crossed that line.
Yet, I'm sure we'll find many who will. Moving on, we have one or two more things here. First off, Elon Musk getting top secret private briefing, apparently.
Yeah.
I've just heard about this today.
Yeah, just went to the Pentagon like you do.
As a civilian.
Exactly. Sat down with the generals and was like, all right, boys, tell me all about our plans in case we have a war with China.
Well, why is that a problem? I mean, if he needs to know that for Doge reasons, for example.
Of course, yeah.
Because Big Balls needs to make sure that those numbers are right. That's the one to show.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, because, obviously the military is going to say, oh, well, we need money for tanks and ammunition and whatever. But the Doge boys, they know that really they're wasting it on... I don't know. Yeah, but probably food.
But here's the issue, and I think it's better if you say, because I didn't know this until now. Would this represent a conflict of interest for anyone in the room named Elon Musk?
Gosh, that's funny. You should ask that. It would, in fact. The thing is, Elon Musk has many factories in China.
Oh.
And his ability to keep using those factories to make money from the operation of those factories is therefore very much dependent upon his relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Elon Musk himself has described himself as being somewhat pro-China, on account of, literally the thing that I just said. So
it's hard to do business with China if you're not pro-China.
China does not have a strong track record, shall we say, of letting people make money regardless of their position on the awesomeness of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
So this does raise the ticklish suggestion that he might see some benefit to learning lots of national security secrets from the United States regarding the U.S.'s relationship with China and possible preparations in case of armed conflict, and then telling it to Xi Jinping.
Allegedly, maybe not. I mean, obviously, he could just keep it all in his giant, supersized mega brain.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And
He might
hold on
not.
to it.
Yeah. Just because he has an incentive to do a thing doesn't mean he's going to do it, people.
Sure. I mean, who knows what he's going to do with the information that he's getting? The problem is that he's getting it.
That's the thing.
He's not a member of the government. He's not a member of the military.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of clearance he has?
Well, and more to the point, why does he need to know any of this?
That's a very good question.
Like, why would you even tell him this in the first place? Regardless of whether, like, if it's a situation where I say to myself, okay, I know that I'm about to do something risky, this could really backfire, but on the other hand, I will get no benefit from it whatsoever. Then I'm going to say to myself, no, that's a bad thing. I'm not going to do that thing. That's a stupid idea. If it's heads, I get nothing, and tails, I saw off my own foot, then that is a stupid game, and I shan't play it.
It's a bad game to play with yourself.
Exactly.
So I guess we'll just keep an eye on this, because that's just news to me today.
Yeah.
And finally, before we come to the break, if you're European, coming to America might not be a smart idea for the next 4 years.
Maybe just put the kibosh on the whole grand trip to America. Maybe now is not the time for that big road trip you were planning.
Unless, of course, you are a fascist. In which case, by all means, this is your time to shine.
Yeah, go for it. Go, run, exactly. Because they are absolutely going to pay lots of attention to your politics. And not, throw you in a dungeon and tell nobody where you are for several weeks at a time.
For clarification, over the past week as well, we've been learning more and more of European citizens being detained and or deported by immigration officials in the United States.
Yep.
We talked about a few last week, a few people who had the right to be in the United States.
Yep.
They had visas or green card status.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was resident?
One of them was, had a green card. This was the German
Schmidt
citizen. I believe his name is Schmidt, yes. So he ran afoul of immigration for reasons that we're still not very clear on, actually.
Yeah, it was Fabian Schmidt.
Fabian Schmidt, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, and of course we also had the doctor who was Lebanese, who was expelled back to Lebanon after going to visit her family, despite the fact that, she's a doctor, and we kind of need those in America.
Yeah, and so we've had a few more. There's been French people who've been detained, and been Germans. Well, more Germans who've been detained, and English people who've been detained.
Yep.
And the
Canadians as well.
Canadians have been detained,
Yep.
and I think that deported or still are under detention. I don't know.
Yeah.
Their status.
There was one Canadian woman who was, I believe she worked as like a yoga instructor. She had a work visa to work in the United States. She was getting that renewed. She was in the office to have that be done, when all of a sudden she is taken. Her belongings are taken from her. She's told she has to get rid of half of her belongings, basically. Then they ship her off to basically what sounds a little bit like a black site, where she's held in a very cold concrete room. She has a space blanket, which is basically tinfoil, where you get tinfoil so you don't literally freeze to death. The lights are kept on 24 hours a day. She's in a cage with several other people who have been there for weeks, and she finds herself stuck in this basically legal black hole for 2 weeks before finally she's able to contact people on the outside. They're able to raise the alarm with the media, and only because the media started reporting on her was she released. And there were many people she was with who do not have people on the outside and who have been there for months. And
one of the concerning threads through some of these new detentions or just refusals to entry is they found something on these people's phones that they did not like, and that seems to be either anti-Trump, anti-Musk material. In the case of the Lebanese doctor, they claim to have found some, quote, pro-Hezbollah pictures on her phone, or things that was in favor of, not even in favor, just
We're going to be talking very shortly about the sorts of evidence that the Trump administration seems to feel make someone a threat to the United States and to its government when we come back after the break. But my goodness, it's not very convincing.
Yeah. So, as I said, we're witnessing the degradation of the basically free speech,
Yeah.
and also civil rights in America. They're starting with the immigrants. They're starting people who are coming over,
Yep.
hoping that you don't care, and the people who don't kick off a fuss. If you don't kick off a fuss, they'll just keep on moving up the chain until they finally reach regular American citizens.
Well, the thing is, if we will be talking about this more after the break. We'll be talking about the Tren de Aragua people who were sort of scooped up and sent out of the country to El Salvador to go into a notoriously violent, horrible prison where they'll be forced to work, which, you know, is not great. But the level of review that's necessary for them under the administration's theory is basically nothing. I.e., the administration can just sort of say, we think that this person is a gang member, and we're going to move them out without any judicial review, without them ever seeing a judge. We can just do this. And
with that, we're going to take our break so we can get back into that in the next section. So,
all right, but now a word from our sponsors.
Right, this week's sponsor is the Woolsack.
Yes!
Which is the seat in the House of Lords where the Lord Speaker sits, named after the wool trade.
Mm-hmm. Because that is where the building, where they said used to be. It used to be the center of the wool trade in London. And that Woolsack has now become sentient, has come into some money, and is using it very kindly to support this podcast.
All right, we'll see you in a second.
And we're back.
And we're back. Even a bigger spike that time.
That was a huge. Sorry, I'm loud. I'm
you
a loud man.
Well,
That's why the Woolsack has already pulled his sponsorship of this program. He's just his tender little wool-packed ears just couldn't handle it when I say the truth.
So when you say the truth, you spit hot fire.
Exactly.
All right. So
as I do.
This next section, we're going to talk about a couple of things, specifically what we were talking about before regarding people getting deported.
Yeah.
And also the results of judicial actions regarding that deportation and impeachments. So why don't you let it take off with what's happening with these people who got these quote unquote Venezuelan gang members who were then deported to El Salvador.
Yeah.
Because reasons.
Yes. So the administration, when you checked in last week, the administration had claimed that the criminal gang known as Tren de Aragua, which is a gang of Venezuelan origin, was secretly working with the Venezuelan government. And because some of its gang members were in the United States, that this therefore constituted an invasion of the United States by the Venezuelan government, thus meaning that America is at war with Venezuela, and thus activating the Alien Enemies Act of 1798.
1798.
This is all my balls, Chris. Because as it happens, the president doesn't have the power to declare war.
No, it doesn't
at all.
Absolutely does not. That is very clear in the Constitution.
Yeah, this is one of those Article 1 situations which
famously comes before Article 2.
It rather does. So it's a little bit funny, is how I'll put it. But not funny, haha, more funny,
funny, ruh-roh.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. But so the administration, having claimed that this is the case, then rounded up several people, claiming that they were members of this gang, and claiming that under the Alien Enemies Act that they could be removed immediately without any review by a judge. What's interesting here is a few things. Number one, even if we accept the idea that the United States is at war, and therefore that the Alien Enemies Act has actually come into force, we still are left with the question of whether or not the government would be in a position to be able to say, oh, this person is an alien enemy, without providing some evidence, without going before a judge and proving their case. Whether or not, in other words, the question is whether or not the alien enemy in question would be able to make use of due process, which, it should be noted, is guaranteed in the Constitution.
Right. And is that limited to citizens? So if a person comes over from another country and they get into a fight and they get arrested, do the police have the right to throw them into a dark hole forever and then they can never see their family again?
Absolutely not.
That's outrageous.
Yeah. Well, as it happens, the Constitution makes no distinction between citizens and non-citizens when it comes to the right to due process. In fact, the whole issue of due process is understood in constitutional terms as being a question of what the government is empowered to do. It's not an issue of what protections people have against the state. It's a question of whether the state even has the right to do something in the first place.
Right.
So for the state to have the right to act, it has to follow certain processes. And of course, that's what due process is. So what's incredibly dangerous about a situation where due process no longer applies is this. If the government doesn't have to show any evidence that a person is an enemy alien, then that person could be literally anybody.
Yeah.
You could be an enemy alien. Maybe you are a member of a foreign government that is actively making war. Maybe you're a citizen of that government who happens to be living in the United States and has done something. Maybe you're a citizen of that foreign country living in the United States who has done nothing.
Right.
And in fact, it was precisely under this power that Japanese Americans were rounded up and placed in internment camps during World War II. The Supreme Court actually had to rule on this in Korematsu, as well as some related. Oh yes, yeah, one of those really great,
one of those big deal ones.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I've actually read the decision in Korematsu, and it's quite interesting because while it does accept that the government had the right to intern enemy aliens, it then also stated in that exact same ruling that the government had the right to do that in order to determine whether they were enemy aliens.
Yeah.
And they had to prove that they were enemy aliens. And if they weren't enemy aliens, then they had to be let go. So Korematsu, it's an incredibly dark and bad decision that basically gave the okay to America operating its own concentration camps.
Yeah.
But it's also the reason why the concentration camps ended almost immediately afterwards.
Right.
Because the ruling said, well, you have to figure out, are they an enemy? And if they're not, you gotta let them go because, that that's crazy to do otherwise. So when Korematsu is a better defense of people's civil rights than the actions of the current government, it raises some very tricky questions to answer. And of course, that leads me to my final point, which is this. If the government can declare anybody a criminal alien and not have to go before a judge and prove it, then they can say that anyone is a criminal alien, citizen or otherwise. Because,
And this is the crux of the problem. So if you've heard about this before, you're probably hearing the rebuttal of, why are all the lefties defending criminals? And here's the reason why. It goes back to what Patrick was just saying. Are we sure that everybody that was rounded up was a criminal? And the answer is no.
In fact, we're sure that some of them aren't. If I can direct your attention, Chris, to one particular case. Yeah, so one of the people who is currently basically having his head shaved and being forced to work in an incredibly violent prison is a Mr. Jersey Reyes Barrios, who is a Venezuelan citizen. 35 years old, a former football player, that's soccer for the Americans in the audience, who got crosswise with the Maduro regime because presumably he is a normal human being who realized that Maduro is a horrible person and, a nasty little dictator, quite frankly. But so, being someone who was not a fan of the Maduro regime, he got the hell out, which is a very smart move on his part. You would have thought. He comes to America, he applies for asylum, and now he is rotting in a prison. On what evidence would you say would justify this? What is the government claiming that they have, Chris?
Well, they must have a docket, 3 feet deep, filled with all the proof of his associations and criminal actions and criminal intent.
I mean,
I'm just using words I've heard on television.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that would make any judge say, "Oh, well, that's something. Let's investigate. Let's check that out. Make sure that all the T's have been crossed and I's dotted."
There's another word for that. It's called proof.
Yeah. Proof. Evidence. All the kinds of due process.
Due process.
Due
There it
process.
is again. There
Yeah.
it is. Wait.
Yeah, they didn't have any of that.
Oh, what do you mean they didn't have any of that?
They had literally none of that. Here's what the government says.
The United States government
is their evidence. This is
Led
what
by
they are.
MAGA.
This is what they are saying that they have. He had a tattoo of a soccer ball with a crown on it. Now, for those of you who follow soccer, football, if you will,
Oh my God.
you may have heard of a tiny little team, a young go-getter team. You know, it's not very well known, called Real Madrid.
It's a team that is notable.
Yeah.
In the football world.
I mean, it is. I mean, to be fair, I don't follow sports ball myself.
Okay.
And I have heard of Real Madrid.
Yeah. They're kind of like it's kind of like you don't follow baseball, but you know who the Yankees are.
Yeah, exactly, right. So this is kind of a thing, and they're basically he has a Real Madrid tattoo because he is a soccer player, and that is the proof that they have. That's their evidence of him having gang affiliations that make him a member of a gang that they claim, let us not forget, is actually effectively in unison with the Maduro regime.
Right.
So, yeah.
Person who claimed asylum
From the Maduro regime because, you know, he had reason to think that they were out to get him.
Right.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
So these people were scooped up overnight, put on a plane. Plane takes off, flies to El Salvador because they can't go back to Venezuela.
Yeah.
I guess Venezuela won't like that plane.
Venezuela is not accepting any applications at this time, basically.
So instead, at the same time, there were people who decided that this is a breach of their human rights or the civil rights. So they applied to get that plane to get those deportations stopped.
Yeah.
They went to a certain judge, James Boasberg. Boasberg, yeah.
It's Boas, and I'm not certain how to pronounce that.
We're working on that.
Yeah, we're going to say Boasberg for the moment, and if we're getting that wrong, we are very sorry, Your Honor. We mean no disrespect to the court. Unlike the government.
This is true.
Yeah. So this is funny because I just want to. I'm not a lawyer in the United States. I have a legal background. I have legal education in the United Kingdom. So I can speak with some knowledge here, but not a huge amount. I don't need a huge amount to be able to comment on this aspect. The judge, when presented with a request for a temporary restraining order, which is basically a way of saying, look, this is clearly illegal. You clearly can't be doing this. So we're going to put a halt to this until we can get to the bottom of it. Which it's a very hard bar to clear. And the plaintiffs cleared it in this case. The judge was like, oh yes, no, this is crazy pants. We're going to put a halt to that. No deportations, because we need to actually determine whether or not these people are who you say they are in the first place.
Which is really, really important when you think about ripping people out of their homes, away from their families. You need to have a very good reason to do so.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, you're a foreigner, get in the bus.
Or even, you're a person we don't like, get in the bus.
Yeah.
Which is what the government can do if they don't have to go before a judge to prove anything.
Right.
So, in this circumstance, the judge had a pretty clear situation, right? The judge gives verbal orders to say, okay, well, no deportations. This is a temporary restraining order. This is happening. If there are any planes in the air, you tell them to turn around. You tell the government immediately that this is the order from this court. This is the ruling. And
the people flying the planes will be American citizens, yes?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So they'll be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States of America.
Well, it's funny you should say that because the court actually has, under its equity power in the United States, jurisdiction that extends outside of the territory of the United States. So the fact that the planes were in the air, the fact that the planes were in international airspace, the fact that the planes were landing, none of that would matter as long as the plaintiffs were in U.S. custody. Then they would be subject to this order. They would be in the judge's jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a big deal.
So the
right?
judge wasn't in the wrong, and the judge wasn't overstepping their bounds.
Oh no, this is
because he's a chief judge of a district court in D.C., I believe.
Yeah, no, he is a federal judge. He has a large amount of experience, it seems, dealing with classified evidence, dealing with issues of national security. This is not his first rodeo. But he is very clear in his verbal orders, and those verbal orders were, reported by reporters who had been following the case. This is what all the lawyers involved who were on the call, they understood that to be the case as well. So there's really no doubt about the nature of the verbal orders that the judge gave. Now, what ended up happening was they did not, in fact, do that. Instead, they let the planes that were already in the air keep going, land, disgorge their passengers into El Salvadorian prisons, and then Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, who calls himself the coolest dictator in the world. Yeah, he's really funny. Wow. He put out a tweet saying, "Too late," with a laughing emoji, and then Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, retweeted it, because that's
jokes. It's for the memes, guys.
Exactly.
Listen, when people are having their civil rights violated, you want to make sure you get your memes right.
Well, exactly.
I want to make those 14-year-old boys guffaw in class.
Priorities, people. Priorities.
Yeah.
So you might think that this is a massive violation of the judge's order, which is not a thing you can do legally.
Yeah.
And you'd be right. Now, when the judge asked the Trump administration lawyers, what the hell, guys? Their response was, and I'm not making this up.
Okay.
You see, it's true you gave a verbal order telling us to turn the planes around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But you see, when you made the written order several hours later, you didn't mention turning the planes around. So we thought that the written order supersedes the verbal order.
Wow.
And, what are you going to do? We'd already expelled them from the country by the time you wrote up the order saying, stop expelling them from the country. You're not allowed to do that at all. So, oopsie.
Whoopsie doodle.
Yeah, this is not a thing. Like, there is no legal leeway here. There is no question about whether or not a verbal order, a verbal ruling from the judge on the bench is binding. It absolutely is.
Well, think of it like this: if there's an execution and you had 30 seconds left before they pulled the lever, and the judge said, "Don't do it" on the bench, and they still pull the lever, they say, "Well, we didn't get the written order."
Yeah, no,
right?
that's murder, Chris.
That's just murder.
That's just murder. That's just flat out murder. So that basically is the situation here. The government has absolutely, it seems, violated a court order. They are being somewhat facetious, I think, in trying to claim that they actually haven't done that.
For the memes.
But yeah.
For the memes.
Yeah. But this is, basically the constitutional crisis is absolutely here. At the moment, the judge is trying to get confirmation from the government about exactly who it is that they sent. The government is now claiming, and you're going to like this, Chris.
I will.
They're claiming that they can't give that information because it's a state secret. You see,
these dangerous criminals, all of whom were part of Venezuelan gangs.
Oh, exactly. The ones that they've been, tweeting about, and that they've been making, promotional videos of them being mistreated, manhandled, having their head shaved, thrown onto a bus, and then, forced onto their knees in a concrete prison. That those guys, we can't say who they are.
Because of state secrets.
Exactly. I don't think this is going to fly with the judge. The thing is, we're rapidly approaching the point where the judge is going to have to hold the government in civil contempt. The judiciary is going to have to start putting some real sanctions on government lawyers who make these kinds of claims. The thing is, if you're a lawyer, you're an officer of the court. You have a duty of candor. You have a duty to not lie to the judge ever. Even if your client really wants you to lie to the judge, you can't do that, or you are, basically...
Well, you'll stop being a lawyer.
Well, that's the thing. You get disbarred.
Right.
And rightly so. So, this is one of those situations where either government lawyers know if they go through with these kinds of arguments that are not just colorable, not just like weak, but actually flat out
lies.
Yeah.
There's lying to the court. Yeah. Which is what the government that's what Trump will want them to do.
I mean, I can't believe that any lawyer had the reproductive organs to think that they could tell a judge, oh yeah, well, we didn't think that a verbal ruling is binding.
Well, I mean, they did the same thing when Trump was trying to take over the government in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if this happens again. There's another half to this story, which we won't spend that much time on, But when the judge made the order, across Magaland, they started to learn about the beauty of impeachment.
They sure did. Impeach the judge for ruling against the president.
For ruling against the president. I believe Elon Musk called it a judicial coup.
Oh, indeed. Indeed.
Because judicial
it's
coup.
the judges getting in the way of the will of the people.
The will of the people.
Which is a funny way of describing the desires of the executive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, it makes sense if you're into the Führer principle. If you're a big believer in the idea that the leader, to use the more neutral term, is the embodiment of the will of the people and knows what it is the people want better than any election possibly could. If you believe that kind of thing, then
this is for you. But just so we can clarify some things here, yes, the Senate and the Congress can impeach judges. They can impeach federal officials.
This is true.
That's not an issue, and that's not in debate or dispute.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is threatening these officials with removal because they have ruled against the president. And Trump did say, they consistently rule against me. Why is that? And the answer is because you keep on doing illegal shit.
Yeah.
So, you keep on, sticking your fingers up ladies. You keep on, lying to people to get their money. You keep
trying to overthrow democracy.
Keeping those classified documents in your house. But just to give you an idea of the number of people who have been removed by the Senate. Now, just to be clear, you can be impeached by the House of Representatives. We've had 3 presidents impeached 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
That's Andrew Johnson.
Yep.
That's Richard Nixon.
Oh,
no. Nixon wasn't impeached.
Exactly. He was just absolutely going to be, and he was going to get convicted.
That's right.
And he was like, okay, I'm a bounce.
I'm going to leave because I know I'm not going to make it. It was Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump twice.
Yep.
But you can use impeachment for other people as well. So, in addition to some federal officials, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 judges be found guilty and removed from office by the Senate after being impeached by the House of Representatives.
And that just to be clear here, Chris.
Yeah, okay.
When you say judges, do you mean Supreme Court judges?
No.
Do you mean appellate court judges?
No.
Do you mean judges like at the federal level as a whole?
As a whole.
Oh, so well, that's quite a large number of judges, it would seem.
That is quite a large number of judges.
And only 8 of them. And is that only in the last 10 years, was that?
Well, I believe over the last 200 years.
Oh, 200 years!
200 years, we've only had 8 be actually found guilty. And the reasons are amazing. All right, so I'm going to go from the bottom to the top.
All right, do it.
In 2010, Thomas Porteous, I can't read my own handwriting here. Porteous was kicked off the bench for accepting bribes.
Now that's a crime.
That's crime.
A good reason to remove a judge because that's a crime that impinges on their ability to act as a neutral arbiter of fact and law.
Exactly.
Okay, well, good for you, Senate. Good for you.
Walter Nixon, 1989, perjury.
Ooh,
Elise Hastings, 1988, perjury and
Elsie Hastings?
Elsie.
Perjury and bribery.
And bribery.
That's a twofer.
Harry Clybourne, 1986, tax evasion. Halstead L. Ritter, 1936. There's a small 50-year jump there.
Man, what happened by the 90s? 60 years and
favoritism. He was kicked off because he was convicted of favoritism.
Showing favoritism as a judge, can't do that.
Robert W. Archibald, great name.
Ooh.
1913. He had weird business relationships. And so he wasn't able to stay on the.
Business relationships.
To me, it sounded like bribery as well.
Okay,
it sounded like bribery, but they called it like inappropriate business relationships.
Maybe he invested in octopus whips or something like that, and they were like, "No, that's just too weird. That's just too weird. This is 1913, Mr. Archibald, sir. We don't go in for that weirdness today."
There's the last two are a guy named West Hughes Humphreys and another person named John Pickering. Why do you think these 2 people were removed from the bench in 1862 and 1804? Those are your clues.
I don't know. Oh God, I'm like a kid in a candy store here. Did it involve booze? Was booze involved?
1804. The guy was drunk on the bench.
Oh, I'm in love. All rise as the honor slumps to the floor. Oh.
And West Hughes Humphreys He was removed from the bench for being a Confederate. The guy was removed from the bench because he was a traitor.
Okay, yeah, that's again. I'm going to be honest with you, Chris. I feel like with the possible exception of Mr. Archibald there, I feel like these people are not hard done by. These are people who should have been removed from the bench. This is a good use of the impeachment power. The world was just not ready for octopus whips. I get it.
So and the reason I'm bringing this up is very simply because to want to impeach a member of the judiciary because they aren't just supporting the president blindly is wrong. Yeah. And it shouldn't happen. And for the first time ever, I think you're going to agree with this. Here's two things I'm going to say. You probably won't agree with the second one.
All right.
Chief Justice John Roberts, not out of the blue, as soon as this tweet went out, because Trump tweeted that this guy should be impeached.
Yeah.
And John Roberts was like, "What the hell are you doing?" There's a procedure for disagreeing with judges, and that procedure is called appealing their decision. And guess what? I'm the guy you appeal to, and so this isn't the way to do it.
It is very impressive. It's very impressive that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court had to remind the president that there are judges, and there are judges above those judges. And this thing that your lawyers have been doing quite a bit recently is the thing you need to be doing, and not just impeaching judges whose rulings you don't like. That's not how this works.
Yeah, that's not how this works. Also, it's not how it works because the Senate requires 66 or 67 people to vote for impeachment, for removal.
Yeah. And
the MAGA folk just don't have that number yet.
Yeah.
So it would be a waste of time because I'm sure it would get through the House. Because, well, I mean, the margins are so slim there, but let's just assume that it gets through the House.
Finding a single honest Republican in the House of Representatives at this point is, I'm not going to say it's a fool's errand, but I am going to say that I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, we got a bridge to sell you.
Yeah.
So, but getting through the Senate will be very difficult because the MAGA folk did not take as many seats as they need to in order to control the country in that way.
They have 53 seats. They would need 14 Democrats in the Senate to agree to impeach and remove a judge because the judge followed the law.
Yeah, and it's not impossible to think there's not one or two who might do it because of Fetterman reasons. But it's hard to think that you would get 14. And the second thing I want to say before we start winding this up is, does this validate Chuck Schumer? So Chuck Schumer did not.
Oh, those are fighting words, Chris.
But so I'm back and forth here. Chuck Schumer said he supported the continuing resolution last week because he wanted to keep the courts open because the courts are fighting against the unlawful usage of policy by the MAGA administration by Trump. Right. The courts have declared that what Elon Musk did to USAID, I think, is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
We've had this court order against Rubio, the Trump administration, for deporting these people without due process.
We've also recently just had a court ruling saying that Doge needs to keep its sticky fingers off of people's personally identifying information in the Social Security system, because even if they do want to go trolling for lols or whatever, they don't get your Social Security number when they do that. I can't believe we needed a judge to say that.
But apparently we definitely did, because we got teenagers running around thinking they know what the hell's going on in America's private information. So
big balls, who hurt you?
That's twice now. We always say once, and we always do it at least twice. But my question is this: if the Trump administration knew that in 6 weeks the courts are going to run out of money, and they could not operate anymore, surely they would just cool it for 6 weeks until the courts just couldn't open. And then you have this problem of, well, who do we complain to? Because the Republicans aren't going to try to pass another resolution until they have done all the damage, right? Yeah. Now we have basically the judiciary, who is part of the checks and balances system, being a check, and they've effectively forced John Roberts into a corner. Look at what's happening here. When these things come across your desk, do you want to eliminate due process in America? Do you want to make sure that a singular person can unilaterally rewrite the Constitution?
Right. Do you want to officially say that Donald Trump is dictator for life? Are you going to be the man whose pen ends the American democratic experiment?
Yeah. But not against it. Because I know how you feel about John Roberts. But the question is that, I mean, I know Chuck Schumer is under a lot of pressure for a number of reasons, but his reasoning for supporting the continuing resolution, and not every Democrat was supporting it, which I think is an interesting move, because it's not the whole party, it's just a few.
Just enough to get it over the line.
Have kept the courts open, and the courts are defending the rule of law.
And that is the only argument, I think, that I do have to reckon with. And I'm speaking as someone who has pretty much come down on the side of saying that, yeah, Chuck Schumer, I think, has made a terrible hash of all of this. I think he's done, even if the decision at the end was right, how he ended up going about it was, I think, quite wrong. Because he had the House of Representatives stick its neck out.
Yeah.
And then he saying that he was going to, that they were all going to work, that they had a plan, and then change his mind at the last minute.
Yeah.
If he's forced out of leadership as a result of that, he can only say to himself, well, that was the choice that I've made.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be unfair. That said, no, I think that this is an argument that needs to be reckoned with. If there were a shutdown that did steal the ability of the courts to actually function, it would remove what is effectively the last line of defense against dictatorship that, well, doesn't involve millions of people taking to the streets in a general strike or something like that, basically. At that point, it's basically either the people make it clear who's sovereign, or that's the end of it. And it would be better if the courts were able to rule in the executive than if you had to sort of leave it to, I don't know how to put that, basically, like leaving it up to the people themselves directly, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean,
so yeah,
and we definitely gonna need the courts open for when eventually people do take to the streets.
Yeah,
and when
you want courts, you want them. They're pretty good. They're nice things to have.
I think it's the only reason for me not to, because I was angry with Chuck Schumer when he's like, I'm going to support this, and then I was angry with him, because there was a day like before he had to do it, and then I saw like when he was speaking. I'm like, I'm going to give him a few minutes while he speaks, and that's the portion that I caught. He's like, we have to fight on numerous fronts, and we need the courts to stay open. And we spent the entirety half of this podcast talking about the courts and due process and the fact they're still open.
Yeah.
So he may not have been he may not have gone about it the right way, but I think that these people are benefiting from his decision.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. And again, it's one that we all have to reckon with now. What kind of choices are we going to make going forward? What is it that we're willing to take a risk on? What are we willing to give up in order to maintain our democracy and our freedom?
Yeah.
So these are not great. I don't like these questions. I don't like the court being a thing where, are we going to have them? Or are they going to completely fall into abeyance now?
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that the question is whether or not Donald Trump is going to openly say law doesn't matter. The judge's rulings do not matter.
Yeah.
I am God King.
I am the law. What he's saying is that I am the law. I determine what the law is. I am I am the source of the rule of law, like a king. Which, not even in the United Kingdom, is the king the source of the rule of law. It's it's the crown
in Parliament.
It's the crown,
exactly,
not the person. So it's so keep those things in mind. I think we'll leave it here. We've had a good old long chat on another new microphone. We'll see how this one's worked out.
Exactly.
Hopefully we don't have to re-record this entire thing, because
let us know in the comments what you think. If you agree with our analysis, tell us why we're awesome. If you disagree, tell us why we're morons.
Shut the hell up.
I mean, really, A or B, ¿por qué no los dos? But either way, talk to us. Let us know what you think, because we live and die by your feedback.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. So, as always, I'm Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
And we are doctors,
not doctors.
Good night.